So we will begin. This is Coalition Working for Positive Change. We will have workshop content, talk a little bit about just coalition review, so that we're all on the same page when we're talking about coalitions. Components of effective coalitions, some of the barriers to success, and then what I promised Ruth that I would talk about is lessons learned. I have been building coalitions for the last 27 years in substance abuse prevention. And to discuss, two things that near and dear to my heart is collaboration and sustainability as it relates to building capacity. Just a little bit about the coalition, the Empowerment Zone Coalition, formed in 1996 and was established as a 501c3 nonprofit in 1999. Of course, we got a contract with any of the PHIPs. You have a license. So we have a license from the state of Michigan to provide prevention, substance abuse prevention and treatment services. As Ruth said, we were recipients of the 2000 Outstanding Coalition Award from Community Anti-Coalitions of America. And she also mentioned that we were the first coalition in Detroit to receive the Drug-Free Community Support Grant. And that was in 2000. We were a recipient of that grant from 2000 to 2005. And then we had a 12-year hiatus and we came back in 2017 to 2022 for our second 5 years. We've been an active member of CACA since 1997. And these are, what did I do? New to me, okay? And our funding from these organizations, Detroit Wayne Integrated Health, Prevention Network, and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. We're in our last year. Actually, we finished our DFC grant, but we were fortunate enough to be able to replicate ourselves. You will have a new coalition in Michigan and in the Detroit area called COPE Detroit. So we will be the fiduciary for COPE Detroit for the drug-free grant to establish themselves. This is the definition that we use for coalitions. This is the definition that CACA has coined. What's key in this definition for me is that we work together, but we retain our own identities. We just agree to work together around a common cause. And that's important because if you are a part and a member of a coalition, everybody at the table can claim it because we're working in tandem and in collaboration with each other. Oh, all of you know this. This is the planning framework that we use for coalitions. Back when they were forming the coalitions and CACA was trying to figure out how to have something that would be consistent with coalitions. The Center for Substance Abuse Prevention came up with this framework. And so this is the framework that we work by. And as you see, capacity building is one of those things that we work on. And when you're working with the strategic prevention framework, at the beginning, you may start with the assessment and go round to your right and keep it going. But this framework is also meant to be able to use at any point of these. It just doesn't have to go in sequence. Issues? We do multiple strategies across multiple sectors. And what that means is that we're always working on something. If we got our pulse on the community, just as it is right now, what has hit the street just before Halloween is rainbow fentanyl. You know, so we're working on rainbow fentanyl. Then there's sweet tart meth. There's THC, gummy bears. There's chalk fentanyl. And then we're also still working on prescription drugs, alcohol. So that's what they mean by we're working across multiple sectors and multiple strategies. You know, we're working with law enforcement, with the DEA take back. We may be in schools, as I heard Caitlin say. So the coalition is designed to move quickly. Now, sometimes we're not able to do that. It just depends on what structure that we have. We also are designed to reduce risk factors and increase protective factors. And then coalitions also, even though some of us work in direct service, when it comes to the drug-free community support grant, they're the only grant that allow us to do only environmental strategies. And when we're talking about environmental strategies, prevention seeks to alter two kinds of environment. The individual environment, which we would then put that under direct service, the environment in which an individual child grows, learn, or mature. And that could be not only a child, it could be an adult. Shared environment is the environment in which all children or adults encounter threats to their health, including substance use disorder. This is just a diagram to show you that you have strategies targeting individual environment, which is socialized instruction, guide, or counseling. And the image on your left is showing you how it intertwined. You have the individual in the middle, or the youth, and then all of these environmental factors can influence that individual. When you're targeting shared environment, we're looking at changing norms, regulations, and trying to do something about availability. Just give you a little bit about environmental strategies. Now, a little bit on effective coalitions. You know, effective coalitions promote a climate of acceptance within the coalition. You know, they establish open communication among all. You know, you strive for trust, but sometimes you won't get it, and you shouldn't get upset if you don't. You just got to keep working at it. You know, and you want to anticipate the diversity and try to avoid stereotypes, because you want to create a level playing field within your coalition. Everybody in the coalition is important, whether it's the grandmother on the block club leader, or a CEO of the company. They all have a input and have a level playing field. Everybody's voice is important. Also, in effective coalitions, you want to avoid assumptions. You know, what they say about assumptions. You don't want to assume anything. You know, it's better just to ask when you're at a table of coalition leaders. You want to build that trust and rapport among those people, so that they feel comfortable talking at the table. You know how they always say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas? Same thing should happen at your coalition table. People should feel comfortable about talking about anything at your coalition table, and not have the fear of retaliation, it getting back to their bosses, or it gets back to their organizations, or somebody is judging them for what they say. You want to respect values, beliefs, rights, and practices of others in the collaboration. You know, you don't want to assume that you know that particular culture. There is little unwritten rules in every culture, you know, that only those people in those cultures know. You don't assume, you just ask. I had one person that would always say to me, she's gonna apologize ahead of time because she felt that she was gonna always say something that didn't make it right, or felt that she might say something that's wrong as it relates to a particular belief or right of other people. So she always apologized ahead of time, meaning that she didn't mean no harm, but she just didn't know. Learn to appreciate the richness of diversity as an asset rather than hindrance to communication. You know, oftentimes people are afraid to talk to other individuals of different colors, you know, and you know that hinders you from being able to plan because you want everybody at your table. You want everybody that is interested in the subject that you're trying to do, and ours is substance abuse prevention. Our subject is not an easy subject because people have all kinds of stigma is around substance abuse. You know, every time I turn on the news, there's an actor or actress that's having, you know, recovery, but yet we don't have them in the field being our spokespeople. And so that tells you right then that we have such a stigma around substance use prevention that we have to work hard. And if we're going to work hard, we need to be working together. And we must be inclusive and achieve.
We're not seeing the slides advance. We see just the first bullet point on this one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. How else would I know that I ain't advancing the slide? Okay, you learn to appreciate the richness. You know, you want to be able to have that open line of communication at your table, and you want to be inclusive, you know, and achieve your outcomes. Because if you achieve your outcomes, that increase your likelihood of being funded, because people, you are able to do what you say you're going to do. This is, I'm going to put the picture up here. I told Ruth at the beginning, I did not plan for these slides to have animation. And at this point, it won't tell me how to take it off. Coalition, this is the same from Jonathan Spector. He's the senior principal person for the Clearing. Their company is designed to for solutions to empower leaders and their team, resulting from livable strategies and transformation that stick. And what he said about coalitions is coalitions succeed when they have a goal that's worthy and inspiring, when all parties recognize that the goal cannot be achieved by any individual entity. And that's key. What coalitions do cannot be done by any one organization. If we're doing it right, we are collaborating with a variety of organizations so that we, one, don't duplicate services, and that we can pool our resources and maximize those resources going back to the community. He says, therefore, they may work together, and when the work of the coalition is delivering results. And so this tree right here is outside my home. All our trees in our neighborhood, I love fall. This tree is gold. There's another one across the street that's fuchsia. So, and I used to love going up north when it was time to go to Central, because you have such an array of trees and the colors that they change. That's enough to calm you. Some of the barriers to success. This one is self-explanatory, lack of direction and focus. You know, we're all over the place. We really don't know what we want to do, trying to do too much at one time. about this turf battles and competition. Those are truly a barrier to the success of coalition. Because if you have those turf wars, so worried about the turf war that you're not actually getting anything done. You know, organizations often are very sensitive about sharing their work, their target population, and especially their funding, because we're always vying for funding. But when you're building coalitions, you must spend the time convincing the partners at your table and members that working together will benefit all of them and better address their common issues. This is a good one, hidden agenda. You know, as people come to your table, they're not as earnest. I remember we built a coalition and we trained our members well. So there was a person that came in and he just kept asking questions and asking questions. So finally, one of the coalition members said, well, okay, we've answered your question, so what are you bringing to the table? Because that's what you want to create in your coalition, is a win-win situation. You can take resources away as long as you bring in resources. But if all you're doing is having a hidden agenda by trying to take the resources away from the coalition, then it's not going to work very well. Bad history can be a barrier. Organizations may have bad experience that convince them it is not possible to work with others together at all. So you want to make sure, that you maintain good history with their community. Failure to plan or act. You know how they always tell us to plan our work and work our plan? It is crucial when you're doing coalition building, because you got to know we're doing so much that you got to know what you're going to win. You know, and sometimes, you got a dominance of professionals. You know, all too often agency people will advance with advanced degrees, business people, elite and others in a hurry to solve problems or to help the disadvantaged. They neglect to involve the people most affected by the issue and other community members. We should create a participatory atmosphere. You want the people that you're trying to serve to be active members, because technically with the coalition, you want to work yourself out of a job, although it don't seem like that right now, because you want the people to, train the community well enough that they institutionalize the concept that you're trying to do, and they're able to do it. It's just say if our funding goes away, they're able to continue. At one time, we were able to fund grassroots organizations $5,000 to actually do activities in the community. And what we did was we trained them, one, in how to write mini grants. We trained them that they couldn't commingle those funds that we were giving them, that they get half up front and they return those receipts, and then they would get the other half, and then you help them to plan their activity. Many of them were faith-based, and they had youth programs. So when we were no longer able to fund them, they were able to continue their programs because they had learned the basics of how to do mini grants and to do prevention activities. The important links to the community. Oftentimes we don't have those links to the people in the community. When you do outreach, you got to get out there amongst the people. You got to learn who those people are, who's the movers and shakers in those neighborhoods. Sometimes the grandmother knows everything because she's at home and she's able to see what's going on in her community. She's a valuable part to be part of your coalition, because she can also help you when it comes to you designing programs, coalition. I remember one time we designed a bookmark. Oh, the bookmark was really pretty, and it had all of this information on it. And one of my grandmothers in the community, she looked at the brochure. She said, "They ain't gonna read all that. That's just too much." So what we did was we put 5 facts on the other side with some resources. And so we made it a 2-sided brochure so that one side, when we're out in the community, you turn that side up. If we with professionals, we turn the other side up. But we would not have thought of that had we not had her at the table. Okay. Then minimizing organizational capacity. You know, we may limit resources so we find individuals and organizations that can share the burden. That's what you look for. You know, you may have an organization that has a room to meet in, you know, hold your meetings. You know, you look for a way to be able to share what you're trying to do in a coalition. You know, sometimes you have more funding, too little funding, and sometimes it's a problem when you have too much funding. Because if you don't have a direction for that funding, that could be a problem. Not enough funding can be an obstacle, or additional funding sometimes will push the coalition in the wrong direction. So, used to call back in the day chasing the money. If you chase the money and you don't have a plan to go along with it, then you could work yourself into a problem too. You know, having enough time and loyalty conflicts, you know, that could be another barrier to your success. You know, lack of leadership, ongoing staff or member training. These are all things that will you in the long run if you don't work to get it. You want leadership because you want buy-in. You want buy-in from the community. You want people to be able to divide up the task. And if you don't have that, you will run into a challenge. You know, a lot of times when we first started, some of the coalitions, they are all volunteer based. They're committed volunteers, but eventually you want to work to try to get at least staff or a board, because you need somebody to facilitate what the community is saying. Volunteers are very valuable, but sometimes they cannot always be there at every event. You want your members trained so that when you want to go to advocate for your community, sometimes they often think when we're advocating as the staff, we're advocating for ourselves and our own to maintain our job. But if you get a group of coalition members, grassroots coalition members, they don't play that kind of politics. They're talking about what, and that's their constituents, so they're more apt to listen. And then you want to avoid burnout and unrealistic demand on your members and your staff, you know, because you don't have that balance. It's easy to burn out in this field because you are always moving. You know, the community never shuts off. So we have to have that balance, and we work towards that balance. One of the lessons I've learned over the years in doing coalition building, you have to have a strong infrastructure, you know, so that you can handle some of the things that comes down if your structure is strong. Coalitions need strong infrastructure. You want to work, let me ask you, and you could either do it in the chat And Ruth will tell me what are the components of a strong infrastructure? You can open up your line and tell us. Chat. Yeah, Carla's asked, would we be able to get a copy of the presentation? Yes, you will.
So we haven't had any responses in the chat, but I'm wondering if we can just invite people to come off mute and have this conversation. What are the parts of an infrastructure that we really critically need to have? Because whether you're part of an organization right now that's a nonprofit or an independent organization, or if you're part of a well-established coalition that's been around for 28 years, we're looking at this, we're looking at the same core components here. So it looks like Krista added in the chat box, leaders, planners, implementers, working on one entity, working as one entity. Kayla says a board.
Good answers.
The way I'm doing it is, I'm calling our community a coalition, even though it might not be perhaps, but the empowering of others, the influx of the people coming in to our well-being, the redeemables, resilient, community members becoming valuable assets to the community again, and then being there to guide them as they move up into the positions that they become what I am, like you said, working myself out of a job. They become the empowered people, creating tomorrow's wealth. It's an investment of well-being of which there's no upper limit.
So true. And Mary Jo says strong mission statement. Krista says clear vision on what needs to be accomplished. And you're right, there's a lot that goes into your infrastructure. And like you said, your vision, your mission statement, your bylaws, you want to do goal setting, you want action plan, or a strategic plan, depending on, what you're trying to accomplish. So those are all things that you need to have in place. Plus, like Matthew said, you want the community involved. Your members' recruitment is key in building your infrastructure.
And Ebony added a common purpose, and I think a lot of people touched on that. We have to have a shared goal that we are willing to share our resources on. One thing I didn't hear anybody say was a feedback loop. Yes, you want to have your community involved, but we want to also have some evaluation pieces in place so that we know if we're actually delivering what we said we would do.
See, you think Ruth has already seen my slide presentation, right?
I have not, right?
No, because the next subject was evaluation.
I just know coalition work.
So yeah, like Ruth said, when we were funded by CSAP, back then CSAP used to bring all their grantees together, and we were funded for the coalition demonstration grant. And the first thing that they said, there's two things that you want to start at the beginning, and that's your evaluation and your sustainability. You want to start, you don't want to wait till the third, you're funded for 3 years, you don't want to wait till the third year to start looking for funding. Want to make sure that your evaluation is tight. You can achieve your outcome, and you can say to people that, this is viable and you have the evidence based on your evaluation. Needs assessment, conducting a valid needs assessment is vital to giving the coalition and its work credibility. You know, it also gives the coalition a sense of accomplishment. A project is completed, and it adds the likelihood of the coalition continuing its efforts. I want to be able to communicate well. Communication among coalition members is key. Developing newsletters, meetings, conference calls, anything that you can do to coordinate activities and events so that all of your members stay on the same page. Because if everybody's informed, it makes it much easier to get input, feedback, and to coordinate activities. On member skill building or training. It's essential that members are trained. It builds confidence among the members in your coalition and efforts, and it builds leadership. You know, a lot of times people are reluctant to take on something, or they don't have the confidence when they feel like they don't know what they're talking about. So if we train our coalition members to know as much as we do, then they're more apt to step up and to take on a leadership role. Marketing is key for your coalition. If you can't raise the visibility of your coalition and people don't know you're there, they don't know how to tap into you. And this is something that we did in the next slide, and hopefully it will work for me, to market ourselves.
I don't think there's a person in this room that cannot raise their hand and say substance abuse hasn't affected them directly or indirectly.
When I first started working at Jefferson Assembly Plant at the age of 17, when I was sober, without the addiction in my life, I was doing fine. Once the addiction got a hold to me, I started falling off.
And we must begin to treat substance abuse like we do any other health problem. We do prevention around every other health problem, we do intervention, and we do treatment. It is a continuum, because if we don't bring down the wall, the stigma, and the denial, we can't do anything about the problem.
Drugs just ruined my life. I'm in the process now to get my daughter out of foster home because my life is ruined. I've been divorced 3 times because of drugs, and it's ruined my life.
And as you look at what those elements that actually help to get us to this point in time where parents aren't able to care for their children, where people are being incarcerated at alarming rates, where persons are unable to complete school or a job, what was it? What was the common denominator? And without question, it was substance abuse.
Since 1996, when she created the Empowerment Zone Coalition, Doreen Turk White has mobilized an effective coalition for change. The EZC has reached out and into the community and has recruited more than 100 members. Faith-based leaders, family service organizations, businesses, law enforcement, schools, and residents work together, unified, in creating programs with a singular goal: a safe, healthy, and drug-free society for the citizens of Detroit. And it's working. Over the years, the EZC has conducted a successful community needs assessment to determine the extent and magnitude of the drug problem, built a strong coalition across all sectors of the community, conducted quarterly workshops to educate the community about substance abuse issues, held 9 annual substance abuse summits to discuss drug-related issues and solutions among the hundreds in attendance, launched pioneering programs in Detroit schools that were turned into national drug and alcohol prevention models, developed the You Got the Power peer program for youth aged 10 to 17, and a parent power training and family development project, organized neighborhood events, and with faith-based groups, Freedom Sundays in conjunction with Martin Luther King Jr.'s alcohol and drug-free legacy, and successfully advocated for public policy change. The Empowerment Zone Coalition has also worked hard to spread the word. And the Empowerment Zone Coalition has been recognized nationally as a leader in effective coalition building. It has been awarded local and federal grants, and among other distinctions, it was named Outstanding Coalition of the Year by the National Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America.
We must begin to band together to take care of the people in the community. Because as long as there is one suffering, all of us suffer. We are our brother's keeper, whether we want to believe it or not.
And as you could see, it wasn't just us. You know, we had National Council of Drug Dependency. We had the Honorable Alberta Tinsley Talabi. You know, all of those people that you saw in the groups, that was one of the summits. And we could not have done that without help from our partners and our coalition members. And, you know, and the members of the community. Oftentimes the summits were 500 people. At that time, it was only 3 staff. And so if we did not reach out and ask people to collaborate and partner with us, we couldn't did it. Most of the volunteers were recovering. You know, that was their time of the year that they got to dress up and give back. They were the volunteers at the summit. You have to have a way. What we discovered early on is that coalition building is hard to make that 30-second elevator speech out of. And to get people to understand exactly what we do. So we've been working hard to try to bring that down to that 30-second elevator speech or a 2-minute talk that really gives people an insight of what a coalition does and how effective we are in working in the community. Another thing that we realized early on, you know, you need to work towards paid staff or you borrow staff. Positions that remain viable for us in the community are those where someone, either paid or staff member from one of the partnering agencies, has the responsibility of keeping the coalition functioning. You want to have youth involved in the coalition. I always say that they're our future, you know, but they're also the here and now. They're essential to the coalition's longevity. You know, we train young people, they will continue to work with us, and they also have good ideas. But sometimes some of us are far removed from the people we're trying to serve. If you talk to a young person and they trust you, they can tell you everything that goes on in the community because they're the foot soldiers on the ground. They're walking to school every day. They know, you know, the abandoned houses, the drug houses. They know where to get the drugs. You know, kids know a lot, but we never asked them. You know, we never asked them to volunteer and encourage them to give their input. You know, we reach out to them often. You know, sometimes kids don't want to sit at the table with a bunch of adults. So what you create is maybe an advisory council where they're among their own peers, and then there's a spokesperson from peers that comes back to the coalition. You know, oftentimes we have to think outside the box. We don't always fit in the box in creating things and innovative things to get people engaged. You want those youth to volunteer and to carry out project goals. You want all community members to feel an ownership to the coalition and its work. this, you want to build leadership, because the more leaders that you get out of your coalition, the more the work can be divided up. You know, you have to do it. You know, you want to have that work-life balance, you know, because that, like I said before, community doesn't shut off. If you become the resource in your community, they may call you at any time of night. But you want to know, you know, you want to help and you want to refer, but you also have to take care of yourself so that you can continue to have the stamina to do this work. And collaboration is key. You know, if we collaborate, we create those win-win situations. And you want to be able to have sustainability. You know, as I said, we've been funded for the last 27 years. And we work hard to make sure that we are viable and that we do what we say we're going to do, and our evaluation show the outcomes of what the coalition does. I want to talk a little bit more about, you know, building leadership. Because leadership is very important, and it's very important to groom the leaders, not just to say, oh, will you be the chair of this, and not giving them the ammunition to be successful. It builds a strong coalition to have strong leaders taking charge of projects. You want to have, you know, actively seek out training opportunities for existing and emerging leaders. You know, and we've sent, when we're able, we have the funding, opposed to us going to CACA, we send some of our volunteers and some of our coalition members. They gain that knowledge and understand when we're trying to put action plans together, they understand what we're talking about because they've had the opportunity to go to training. Sending your volunteers or members to the state conferences, or even, you know, there's a lot of free conferences, both online and on, sorry about that. Turns itself back on sometime. And, you know, there are a lot of free conferences that you can send them to. So anytime we would get those type of things across our desk where we couldn't pay maybe for it, we would make sure that they are able to participate in free conferences. Or if you have members of your coalition that have the skills and the content, you get them to also help train your leadership. You could hold leadership retreats. You know, one time we took all our coalition members that wanted to go, we put them on a bus and we took them up to the YMCA camp. And we went back to basics. You know, remember dorm style? We were in dorm style. We had meetings. That's where we planned our strategic plan and our action plan. But it didn't cost a lot. It just, people volunteering their time to go. Want to pair up new and potential leaders with others to establish a leadership role. You want to mentor people, you know, because oftentimes people have the skill to be a leader, but they may not have the confidence. So in pairing up people, you know, that person has somebody to go to and ask questions. You want to develop your youth. You know, you want to have a youth development program. So you're constantly bringing youth in the fold of the coalition. Collaboration creates win-win situations. That's what collaborations. You want to be open, inclusive, and diverse. You know, our membership packet said, you know, we had two types of members, those that lived in the community and those that worked in the community. And so you want to be inclusive of whoever is interested in your issue. And our issue was substance abuse prevention. You want to identify and build upon individuals, organizations, and community assets and strengths. You want to empower your stakeholders in a positive, non-threatening way. We had one member of our coalition, she would interrupt you every 10 minutes. She had a lot of knowledge of the community, and she just wanted to share it. And some people would get aggravated with her. I said, no, that's who you want at your table. Someone that can tell you now, this is all a part of training, you know. And the more she came to the meeting, the more she understood that she couldn't interrupt every 10 to 15 minutes. With successful collaborations, you want to be compelling. Share your vision as much as possible. Use every avenue to educate. You want, you want to base it on strategies and tactics that directly relates to the mission. You know, and we can get on tangents when we're having meetings. You try and keep people to the task at hand, you know, and you want to do what you say you do. If you say your meeting is going to last an hour and a half or 2 hours, then that meeting should end at the time you tell people, because that will keep them coming back, that you're doing what you say you would do. You want to base it on tangible, visible commitment of resources by your stakeholders. When you have your coalition meetings, you're constantly, asking, what is it that we can do to work together? What resources do we all have that we can use to be able to be successful in what we're trying to do? You want to use consensus to reach desired outcomes. Nothing worse than sitting in a meeting and people ask your opinion, and at the end, they've already made the decision. So you say to yourself, well, what am I doing here? Your time is just as valuable as anybody else's.
It's equally bad when you sit through an entire meeting, an entire presentation, and there's no decision made at the end.
That's true. You want to value the process as well as the result. Because if you document your process, what works and what doesn't. What you need to throw out the next time you do your strategic planning. And, your funding sources look for that. They look for you to document your process. Want to make sure you define your goals and objectives. What are you trying to achieve? And you want to celebrate your milestones and achievements. You want to show people appreciation. If you have volunteers, you might, at Christmas time or something to show your volunteers appreciation, make sure you give them a card. You may have a celebration where you give them a certificate for helping out. Acknowledging people doesn't have to be expensive. I remember we asked the school to do a survey for us. What we did for them was we divided it out. We got their classes and we divided out the surveys so that they had the right amount of surveys for the youth that they were going to do it. The teachers agreed to administer the survey, get the kids to complete the survey completely. If they completed the survey, then they could reach into this bag and get a prize. The teachers didn't know at the beginning, but once they returned all of the surveys, We gave each teacher as an appreciation a $5 Tim Hortons card. You would have thought we gave them $100. They were just happy that somebody showed them appreciation for what they were doing. Talked about sustainability starts at the beginning of your award. You know, you constantly have to look for ways to sustain your activities and the coalition at hand, or any community capacity building that you're trying to do. It's creating an effective collaborative that brings together a community to develop and carry out strategic plan. That's what you want to do. You know, and I use the example here, you know, alcohol-related traffic crash deaths. You know, you use data to help you to find additional ways to sustain. You know, it's about, you know, making sure that that you are maintaining your fiscal resources. You want to requires that combination of non-physical resources from the initiatives itself and the broader community. So just as it's important to you, not only the funding, but also human resources is a viable part of sustainability. You got to have the people to be able to help you to carry out what you're trying to do. And sometimes it's not easy to recruit, you know. For every one person that says no, you know, you just keep going. You just keep, you look at no's as a way to incentivize you to keep asking others. Some of the other key elements is leaders who take responsibility for their collaboration successes. Make sure everybody involved feel that they've accomplished. You want to involve involvement of community leaders and community partner organizations, wide variety of community members, you know, in trying to do the sustainability. You know, it shouldn't just be the staff looking for, you know, grants and things. You know, the people who come to your table, they hear about things that goes on in the community. They, you know, sometimes have their pulse on what, you know, in our city, what resources are available from our city government to our Detroit Wayne Integrated Health, which is our PHIP, or our, you know, sometimes we can't expect it to be everywhere. When you're, you are part of that human resources that are looking for ways to keep that, what you're doing going. You have everybody working towards sustaining the coalition, not just one or two. And you want to diversify your funding from the start. You know how they used to tell you, don't put all your eggs in one basket? Because what happens if you drop that basket with all those eggs? Then they're gone. But if you diversify your funding, looking at your action plan and your strategic plan, sometimes you may not be able to fund the whole thing. You might have to fund pieces of it. And so you always want to look at your action plan and say, what part are we working on that we may need sustainability for? Oh, that solid infrastructure, a clear focus on your goals. Sometimes we all over the place, you know, trying to be all things to everybody. And then we don't get anything done because we're so out of focus. You want to be clear on what you're trying to do. And part of that comes from your needs assessment. Do a needs assessment or a resource assessment. You know what resources are in your area. You know what resources to tap. based on your needs assessment. And addressing problems, the community cares. You want to address problems the community cares about and demonstrates the results. Because there is no sense in you creating programs that the community is not going to be involved in. You're wasting their time and your time. That's why you want to make sure that they're included. You want a comprehensive coalition plan to build on that sustainability, ability to adapt to changing community needs.
Can I jump in for a second?
Uh-huh.
On that last screen, the last bullet point, you're talking about creating programs that the community cares about. That's what we have to respond to, but we have to do it in a way, just like you said, that they have that buy-in. There are a lot of resources out there. There are a lot of programs that have been put in place. There are a lot of resources for people to connect with, but they don't engage with those resources because they don't have that one key element of trust.
Exactly.
Maybe people have come in their community and asked for input before and then disregarded it, had these preconceived notions of, well, this is what the funding's for, so that's what we're going to do, but we're supposed to go talk to the community members first, so we're going to do that. It doesn't work that way. And so for those of you who are having trouble engaging your community members, I'm hoping Ms. Doreen can talk with us more about one of the first slides she shared, which was, it'll come to me, when you're talking about trying to be able to incorporate those resources and match the resources with the needs and having that actual buy-in and not having the outcomes predetermined before you make that commitment of what you're going to do and how you're going to spend your resources.
Ask the community, because they will tell you what works and what won't. We often know that you don't come into a community talking about research. That's taboo in the community, because what has happened to the community, and particularly in the Detroit area, is that they say that they're going to come in, do the research, and then there's nothing that comes behind it other than a paper. Nothing to help the community. So community does not like the word research, because they're going to ask you, what are you researching and what's going to come behind that?
Can I say something?
Uh-huh.
That's why, especially with my schooling and different things, since I'm just getting into my career, it's really, we've always said that you're not working for a community, you're working with the community. And if you're not, what are you doing with the limited resources that we do have if you're going to use those resources with something that the community doesn't care about?
Exactly. And that happens sometimes because people have deliverables. That's what I call them. You have things that the funding source say that you have to have. And so, but in order to do that, you still need to take that out to the community. You might create a plan, but you don't implement that plan until you ran it by that community. Because that's how you get the, build the rapport. And then once they give you the input and they see some of their input has been incorporated in that plan, they're more apt to have ownership around it and come back to assist. But if you don't ask them, then you're almost guaranteed to prone yourself to failure, because they're not going to participate.
Do you have any recommendations or suggestions for how we can overcome that bad history in some of those places?
Well, how you do it is you constantly, even if you can't get a bunch of people, you could put together a focus group, and whatever plan you develop, you run it by those individuals. And then the word will spread. Oh, well, that coalition listens to us, and then they'll start bringing other people, and don't get me wrong, you got to be persistent, You got to, you know, you can't flounder. You've got to be committed to go out there and continue to try, even though you may meet opposition. You may meet opposition because they're so used to people coming to them and they're not getting any results from it. So you have to show them that you are committed to follow through. You know, so you just create little focus groups everywhere, you know. You know, we all have family and friends that know other people. So you get them to work for you too. You know, some of my family members are my #1 volunteers. And then they go back and tell their friends, and then they come out. You know, but you have to just keep doing it. You know, you do coalition building and capacity building just like you do a pie. You eat one piece at a time, hopefully. And so you just have to keep doing that repetition, those things that work until it catches on in that community. Favorite community mobilization quotes. It says, community mobilization demands a commitment to action that leads to an overall improvement in the health and well-being of a community. Never lose sight of the fact that changing and organizing a community takes time, effort, and perseverance, but the rewards are worth it. And this is another one of my favorite by Henry Ford. Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. Together we can make a difference.